If you can't control your emotions, people will control you. Most people believe respect is something that others simply choose to give. But psychology shows something very different. Respect is often influenced by subtle behavioral patterns that we repeat every day without noticing. And sometimes, the very thing we do to gain approval, affection, understanding, or validation becomes the exact reason people begin to value us less. The uncomfortable truth is that many people lose respect not because they are weak, unintelligent, or incapable, but because they unknowingly adopt behaviors that communicate insecurity, dependence, or a lack of self-worth. And once these patterns become visible, the way others respond to them begins to change. In today's video, you'll discover one of the most common psychological mistakes people make in relationships, friendships, social interactions, and even professional environments. You'll understand why this behavior silently changes how people perceive you, why it weakens your social presence, and why the more you do it, the less influence and respect you tend to receive. More importantly, you'll learn the psychological mechanisms behind this process and how to break the pattern before it affects your confidence, your relationships, and the way others see you. This is a space dedicated to understanding the human mind and modern emotions, helping people better understand anxiety, relationships, and their inner thoughts. Here, we explore psychology, human behavior, emotional patterns, personality traits, social dynamics, and personal development through a rational and practical perspective that anyone can apply to everyday life. If you stay until the end, you'll understand the hidden psychological signals that make people lose respect, the behavior that quietly damages your social value, and the mindset shift that changes how others perceive you. Because the real problem is not what people think about you, it's the unconscious message your behavior may be sending without your awareness. And once you understand this psychological principle, you may never look at your own interactions the same way again. Have you ever noticed that the moment you start trying too hard to make people like you, something inside you begins to change? You become more careful with your words, you analyze every reaction, you worry about disappointing others, and without realizing it, you start putting your own needs in the background. Maybe you answer messages immediately even when you are busy, accept things that bother you just to avoid conflict, or constantly explain yourself because you want people to understand your intentions. These situations may seem small, but they reveal a deeper psychological pattern that affects the way people perceive you. Many people believe respect is lost because of one big mistake, but often it happens through repeated daily behaviors that slowly communicate insecurity or a lack of personal boundaries. The human mind naturally observes patterns, and people unconsciously respond to the emotional signals we send through our actions. When someone constantly seeks approval, they may unknowingly create an imbalance in their relationships, where their value becomes connected to how much others accept them. The difficult part is that this behavior usually comes from a good place. Wanting to be kind, helpful, and understood is completely human. The problem begins when the desire to be accepted becomes stronger than the ability to stand firmly in who you are. And the signs of this pattern often appear in ordinary moments that most people ignore. What most people don't realize is that respect is not only influenced by what you say, but also by the emotional patterns behind your actions. The human brain constantly looks for signals of confidence, stability, and self-assurance when interacting with others. Without consciously thinking about it, people notice how someone handles disagreement, how they react when ignored, how they respond to criticism, and whether they seem comfortable standing by their own decisions. The hidden mechanism is that many people develop automatic behaviors designed to avoid rejection. They apologize too much, explain every detail of their choices, change their opinions to keep peace, or try to prove their value through constant effort. In their mind, they are building stronger connections. But socially, the message can sometimes be interpreted in a completely different way. Instead of showing care, these actions may communicate that someone is depending on external approval to feel secure. This is why a person can be generous, loyal, and genuinely caring, yet still feel like others do not appreciate them the way they deserve. The issue is not kindness itself. The difference comes from whether kindness is a free choice or a hidden attempt to receive validation. Once this pattern becomes automatic, it starts affecting friendships, romantic relationships, workplace interactions, and even the way people see themselves. And this is where many people begin to notice a painful change in their daily interactions. They may feel that others listen less, value their opinions less, or stop making the same effort they used to make. What makes this confusing is that nothing obvious happened. There was no major argument, no dramatic moment, no clear reason. The shift happened slowly through small patterns that changed the way they presented themselves in social situations. When someone constantly tries to avoid disappointing others, they can unintentionally create a habit of placing everyone else's comfort above their own. Over time, this affects their confidence because their decisions start depending on reactions from the outside. They may hesitate before speaking, question their own choices, or feel nervous about setting simple boundaries. The result is not only emotional exhaustion but also a change in how others respond to them. Social interactions are built on perception, and people naturally respond to the emotional energy someone brings into a conversation. A person who feels comfortable with themselves often communicates stability without needing to prove anything. On the other hand, someone who is constantly searching for approval may send signals of uncertainty, even when they have good intentions. The interesting part is that this pattern can happen to anyone. It is not about being introverted or extroverted, quiet or talkative. It is about the relationship someone has with their own sense of value. And when this internal relationship changes, the way the outside world reacts often begins to change as well. Your brain doesn't react only to what is happening in the present moment. It also responds to emotional experiences that shaped the way you learn to protect yourself. Many behaviors that seem confusing today are connected to patterns created years ago, often during moments when you felt rejected, ignored, criticized, or not fully accepted. The mind has a powerful ability to remember emotional situations, and sometimes it uses those memories as a guide for future decisions, even when the current situation is completely different. This is why someone who was constantly judged in the past may become afraid of expressing opinions today. Someone who experienced abandonment may become overly attached or constantly seek reassurance in relationships. Someone who felt invisible for a long time may work harder than necessary to prove their importance. The brain is not trying to make life harder. It is trying to prevent old pain from happening again. The problem is that protection mechanisms from the past can become limitations in the present. Many people continue repeating the same emotional patterns because they never stop to question where those reactions actually come from. They believe they are simply the way they are, when in reality many behaviors are learned responses created by previous experiences. The need for approval, the fear of saying no, and the habit of over-explaining yourself often have deeper roots than the situation happening right now. Understanding this changes the way you see yourself. Instead of judging your reactions, you begin to recognize the emotional patterns behind them. And when a person becomes aware of these hidden patterns, they finally create the opportunity to respond differently instead of automatically repeating the same cycle. The moment you start observing these patterns instead of reacting automatically, something important begins to change inside your mind. You stop seeing every interaction as a test of your worth and start understanding that your behavior, emotions, and reactions are part of a larger psychological process. This does not mean becoming cold, distant, or pretending not to care about people. It means developing a stronger awareness of why you act the way you do and how those actions influence the relationships around you. Many people spend years trying to change how others see them, but the deeper transformation begins when they change how they see themselves. When you no longer feel the constant need to prove your value, your communication becomes more natural. When you stop chasing every sign of approval, your presence becomes calmer. When you learn to accept that not everyone will understand you, you create more emotional freedom. This process is not about becoming a different person overnight. Human behavior is built through repeated experiences, and changing old patterns requires patience, honesty, and self-awareness. The goal is not perfection, because everyone has moments of insecurity and doubt. The goal is to recognize when an old emotional pattern is controlling your actions instead of allowing you to choose your response. The most powerful shift happens when you realize that respect from others is often connected to the respect you demonstrate toward yourself. The way you communicate your boundaries, handle uncertainty, and value your own decisions creates a message that people naturally perceive. And when your internal relationship with yourself becomes stronger, your external relationships often begin to reflect that same change. Maybe the most interesting part about human behavior is that many of the things we search for outside of ourselves are connected to what is happening internally. Respect, connection, acceptance, and belonging are not created only through words or actions, but through the invisible messages we communicate every day. Sometimes, the moments when people feel the most misunderstood are the moments when they are revealing the deepest parts of themselves without even noticing. A reaction, a silence, a hesitation, or a need to be accepted can carry a story that existed long before that specific interaction happened. The human mind is constantly creating meaning from experiences. It remembers moments, builds expectations, and shapes the way we approach the world. And while we often focus on how others see us, there is another question that quietly remains beneath everything. What patterns are we repeating without realizing it? Because understanding human behavior is not only about changing the way people respond to us. It is about becoming aware of the invisible connection between our thoughts, emotions, and actions. The more we understand this connection, the more clearly we begin to see the person behind our own behaviors. And perhaps the biggest discovery is not learning how to control every situation around us, but finally understanding the internal processes that influence the way we experience every situation in the first place. If you stayed with us until the end of this video, that already shows something important. You are someone who wants to understand the deeper patterns behind human behavior and emotions. If this content helped you see yourself or your relationships from a different perspective, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. I would love to know, what part of human behavior surprised you the most in this video? Your comment is not just a reaction. It helps create more conversations about psychology, emotions, and the way we connect with each other. And if you want to continue exploring the hidden patterns behind the human mind, watch the video suggested on the card and explore the playlist on psychology and human behavior. There are more videos waiting to help you understand emotions, relationships, personality, and the invisible forces that influence our daily lives. Thank you for staying until the end. Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep discovering more about the mind behind your actions.